talk. And now we'll go on to the presentation by Hitoshi. Now, at this point, we have concluded all of the formally scheduled talks, and I'm going to pass this on to Heidi, who will lead a moderated community discussion session. So Heidi may or may not want to take a break, but that's the rest of the schedule for the meeting.
Yeah, well, I think everybody is probably going to be happier if we finish the meeting than if we take a long break and then we start the broader discussion. I noticed that that's actually not supposed to start for another 40 minutes, but maybe we should take a poll of, I don't know if we could set up a poll, but just a raise the hands poll as to whether or not we go ahead here. It should. How many are in favor? Raise your yellow hand if you're in favor of us going for doing it now. Okay. And there's probably going to be some peer pressure going on here. So far, I can't really tell because it's hard to poll.
There's
People,
36 hands up and 5 thumbs up.
yeah. So I realize.
Let me mention that Sarah has pointed out that APS is going to have to unmute everyone, or we won't be able to have a reasonable conversation. So if we could just make all of the remaining participants
All 130 of them.
Yeah, free to be unmuted,
Mm-hmm.
free to have their cameras available.
Yeah,
Okay.
how are we doing on our vote here?
Hands have gone down, so
Okay,
we're
so
losing. The data
now we're
is
gonna.
not accurate
So
anymore.
people can take their hands down if they're in favor of continuing, and people who really want to take a half-hour break and then come back to this in a half an hour, please raise your hand, perhaps anonymously. Okay, I think we're all pooped. These meetings are hard. Okay, so we're proposing that we actually have a live conversation. It is going to be important that people are reasonably, don't talk over each other and behave themselves. But, okay, there was a suggestion that maybe we take a 10-minute break during which people will think of their questions, and then we will come back at what would be 3:50 East Coast time. So everybody take a 10-minute break, and during that time, think about what you want to discuss. And if necessary or possible, you can actually write your discussion topic in the Google Doc, and we can try to address most of those topics. Okay, so everybody, we're coming back at 3:50 East Coast time, and we'll have the discussion then. Please think about what you're going to ask about, and if possible, you can put it in, look at the topics that are already there, and think about if there's one we're not covering. Okay, can people hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, my headset is battery is kind of dying. Okay, so we have to wait another minute and then we're gonna fire it up. Okay, so um maybe we should get started now. And I think the first topic, which comes up in a lot of these, is essentially what do we do, and we don't necessarily know it. What do we do about the current process, which is kind of snowmass leads to P5, leads to HEPAP, leads to actual recommendations cycle, which then leads to another snowmass. And do we need to accelerate that? Do we need to change that process? And we don't actually know how things are going to work. So I'd like to see if people have uh, comments and opinions. And also I would add, how does DPF help with this process? So comments and questions about sort of the overall process. Okay, so Kevin, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I had written something, I think, in the doc that's very similar to this, so I'll just read that and then maybe offer one other thought. The question I had was, so we saw from the presentations from DOE yesterday that we're currently at best in the low budget scenario envisioned in the 2023 P5. Um, but even in the low budget scenario, P5 highly recommended projects like CMBS4 and dark matter Gen 3, which the agency response to those has been negative. It's not clear, what happens to IceCube Gen 2. It really depends on the South Pole infrastructure. We don't know what's going to happen with that. So there seems to be, a pretty big gap to me, even in this low budget scenario, between what we as a community decided on the P5 process and then the agency response. So how should we come to a revised understanding of priorities before the next snowmass in P5? Was the question I had. But I think, going toward your point about this whole process, how do we make changes to this process so that these kinds of big disagreements and differences don't happen again? Because it kind of, it's, I don't know, to me, it's hard to buy into this process over and over again if we keep doing all this work and then the funding agencies push back on a lot of it.
Yeah, I think I'll just make one response is I don't think the agencies know what's going on right now either. We're in a state of flux, but we should be planning for what comes when we stop fluxing. I think that's a way of putting it. And so I think if people can make some written suggestions. The question is, and my successors in the chair line are going to hate me for this, but it sounds to me like DPF can at least serve a convening capacity for people to think about, a mini snowmass. Like what do we want to do going forward, given what we know, and perhaps provide useful input to these panels that the DOE is considering making.
Yeah, I think it's important that we try to plan for when the flux dies down. But I think it's also important in that vein to keep in mind that these disagreements happened before 2025, largely. So it wasn't, just the current state of flux, but that, you could argue there's been flux going back further than that. But it's, I think if we're going to have something like a mini snowmass, we have to really give people confidence that it is worth their time to put effort into this and that the agencies will take it seriously. Um, this was something that I was skeptical of before the previous snowmass, and people convinced me otherwise. I'm very proud of the work we did, snowmass in P5, but then the agency response has been exactly what I feared it would be. So we have to somehow figure out how to be more on the same page so that our input is taken more seriously and has more meaning.
Okay, Jordan?
Yeah, my comment is probably going to be ended up what Kevin said towards the end. My concern is if we're trying to think of another snowmass or P5-like process but without HEPAP, just to remind that snowmass took quite a bit longer than it had intended. I believe it was meant to happen in 2021, but then of course COVID, we kind of extended that for another 2 years, and we talked about basically having a 3 or 4 year process. And I just, it seems, how do we make sure that we're not doing, 3 or 4 years again in like 3 or 4 years just to get back to where we are now? If DPF as kind of a convening committee doesn't make the most sense to me, perhaps, but there has to be some sort of more coherent effort, and maybe something from the funding agencies need to be more made more available to communicate with us what's going on.
Yeah, I've got to say that I think that by the way, is our captioning working?
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, I've got something on top of it, it looks like. Yeah, I think we should think about, when you want to get somebody to do something, do you wait for them to ask you for input, or do you think about how you're going to get input to them? So I think people should be thinking about that DOE is going to have these panels, and we want to make certain that we really do have good community input to them, not just not wait for them to ask us, but start thinking about how we would provide the input that would be useful to them. Obviously, in cooperation with the agencies, but also it's probably a good idea to be prepared uh, ahead of time. Let's see, Corrado.
Um, so, Heidi, I want to come up with a real proposal to discuss with the rest of the community. Um, I think I believe the situation, 3 and maybe 1.5 years after Snowmass has completely changed, right? Because LHCC has found nothing. The budget doesn't support any more P5. The competition with other experiments, with non-US experiments also is no longer in place. So we definitely need to revisit our priorities. And I like the idea of a mini P5. So my proposal is we have a DPF coming at Fermilab in a few months. Uh, at the nuclear physics equivalent gathering in Chicago, there were, I think, at least a dozen, if not more, parallel workshops. We might think of organizing something similar at Fermilab, and we discuss what's the situation and what are the proposals. And eventually, we might prepare a much shorter document for the funding agencies to help them making a decision. Uh,
That
uh,
sounds like a good good proposal. And it's on about the right time scale because we maybe know a lot more about what their plans are by that time.
Yeah, it's not only that, but I think so. Fermilab has several rooms to make many parallel workshops, parallel meetings. So it's an excellent place for doing that. And I agree with you, the timing might be right because we will know the budget. I don't think the scientific landscape will change much by then, but uh, I mean, our uh, friends in theory will help us a lot. So again, my proposal is to try to organize something for the Fermilab gathering.
Okay, thank
It's
you. And I think, yeah,
lots of work on you
yeah, well,
and Sarah.
I'm on the organizing committee, but so okay, so I think we need to move on to a next topic. Let's see what we have here. Uh, yeah, so I think to some extent, we're still wondering. We'll know what the replacement for HEPAP is probably by next summer. Um, I think there's been a lot of discussion about smaller projects, and that seems to be strongly mismatched against the fact that ASTE is not starting right away. That's something we should be discussing soon. Um, so one of the questions is, there are going to be discussions of the offshore Higgs factory as well. Is that something that panel is going to exist? So one of the questions is, how are we going to contribute and broaden for example, the Higgs factory collaboration? It sounds to me like there's sort of a merger going on right now between several efforts. And do people want to discuss how we build that into a U.S. effort that is strong and goes into the decision that we're making? Or that CERN is making? Uh, Kind of look and see find the hands. Corrado, your hand is still up. Are you addressing this question?
Uh, yes, yes. Sorry
Okay.
for speaking a lot. So regarding the Higgs factory, uh, I think what came out from the meeting in Venice is that what we really need for as a high energy collider must be something very clean. Uh, I worked 2 years after the demise of the ILC on a muon collider. I can tell you it's not a clean machine. And same as also an FCC. I think that's the US community is engaging in the muon collider. I'm not sure why. There is a project which is, we could start building it tomorrow, and that's the ILC. And the RF cavities are made in the US at Fermilab. It's just a matter of a budget. But it's a mature project. It's a Higgs factory. You can use it later on by making it longer. So why are we preferring a muon collider to such again, a mature um, project where the US has already spent millions just to putting it together? Thanks.
I will say, in my opinion, it's probably the matter of timing, as the muon collider uh, is later, and CERN will have built something which would be in direct competition with a near-term linear collider. And once they've built something, I don't see that we want to. Once again, we have to worry about the global situation. Um, people, just since Muon Collider came up, do people want to discuss building the U.S. Muon Collider collaboration and your response to what the European strategy had to say about it? Actually, Sarah has her hand up.
So since this is a DPF meeting, one thing I would really like to do is hear from the community, from a lot of you, even trivial things about how DPF can better serve you. I mean, we have an opportunity of now we have 118 of you online, and either you're all completely thrilled with everything we do, in which case, please tell us. Or maybe you have suggestions on how we can do it better. So I'd like to see, some hands up and just any idea about how we can help out this field and how DPF can do things better or how wonderful we are.
Good question. Ken is asking if are you a DPF member? If not, why not? Excuse me. I might add that DPF is a major part of our ecosystem, and unfortunately, we only have about 50% of the people. So, and it's not probably a uniform sample. So there are basic things, questions that came up actually in the questions here. Things like, what is the status of grants for young people? Have the career grants been cut? Have the graduate student grants been cut? Have the REU programs been cut? I discovered that REU programs had been cut by having students come in and complain that they had seen this, that they had been told that they didn't get any funding. And that allowed us to go out and do a survey, which in fact confirmed that most of the REU programs in the US that were up for renewal this year had not been renewed. And everybody was sitting there thinking it was their fault for writing a bad proposal, when in fact it was that the entire program had been substantially cut. And that's the kind of thing where conversations within the DPF and alerting each other to problems are really useful. So one of the things is, if you are encountering problems with funding and things like that that are unusual, don't think it's on you. Contact us and we'll try to get some aggregate information so that we can find out what's really going on.
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. So I think maybe everyone's tired, or maybe this isn't a great format for having discussions. But if people would like to make suggestions through email, we would be happy to hear from you from email about whether this event was useful. Did you like this event? How could we improve this event? How often should we have events like this? Ideas like Corrado discussed about things that we could do during DPF. Feel free to email us, and we would really love to hear from you and hear your feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, and we are planning to have another one of these on sort of the May timescale. We'll try to announce it earlier so that people can plan for it better. But otherwise, unless people really feel that they want to continue onwards with this meeting, after 6 hours, I would suggest that we call this meeting to a close and thank everybody for their attendance, and also thank the APS team and Amanda from Whitecoat for providing the technical support and the captioning. And yes, if you hated the Google Doc, please tell us. We don't know what other technology we could use. Okay, so anyways, thank you all, and we will see you in in a few months again, virtually. And by the way, you should be glad I'm virtual because I have a really bad cold. Okay, thanks and goodbye.